You ever wonder why the women you want the most are always the ones who hurt you the deepest? Why the ones you chase never stay, and the ones who stay never feel like enough? You're not broken. You're caught in a pattern you never chose. A story written before you knew how to read it. It starts with a feeling you can't quite name. Not joy, not love. Something else. A haunting familiarity. Like walking into a room you've never seen but somehow knowing exactly where the furniture is. You meet her. She smiles, she listens, she looks right into you. And suddenly you feel seen. But you're not. Not really. You're not being seen. You're being scanned, measured, evaluated, compared. Like a suit off the rack. Like a painting to match her walls. Like a part in a script she's been writing since she was 12. You feel special. But that feeling isn't about you. It's about what she thinks you might become. You mistake it for destiny. It's projection. She doesn't love you. She loves the story she's created in her mind. And you're just the latest actor cast in a role you didn't audition for. Carl Jung warned us about this. He called it the animus, the inner masculine fantasy that lives inside every woman. And when that animus is unconscious, it doesn't inspire love. It demands performance. You're not her partner, you're her puppet. And the moment you deviate from the script, the moment you forget your lines, the moment you show up as yourself, she doesn't edit the story, she changes the actor. But you don't see it. Not at first, because the story is beautiful, the seduction is subtle. She tells you you're different, she tells you no one's ever made her feel this way. She tells you you're safe, and you believe her, because you want to, because no one ever told you to question being desired, because no one taught you to distinguish love from validation, because the little boy inside you still aches to be chosen, and now he thinks he's finally been picked. So you perform, you try to become the man she sees, you mold yourself to fit the mold she's made, you say the right things, you hide the weak parts, you become the mask, and for a while it works. You get the affection, the attention, the illusion of intimacy, but not the truth, never the truth. Because truth requires presence, and projection is the opposite of presence. It's not about who you are, it's about who she needs you to be. And when you become too real, too complex, too human, the illusion shatters. And she doesn't grieve. She doesn't mourn. She doesn't try to understand. She simply replaces you. Because in her mind, you were never a person. You were a function, a fantasy, a mirror for her invisible man. This is where most men lose themselves. They confuse being discarded with being defective. They confuse rejection with failure. They ask, what did I do wrong? But Jung would ask a different question. What made you think you were ever being loved? Because here's the truth, you weren't. You were being used, not maliciously, not with evil intent, but unconsciously. Because she hasn't met her animus. Because she hasn't made him conscious. So she projects him onto you, and then resents you for failing to live up to her dream. You didn't betray her, you disappointed a ghost. But let's be honest, you do it too, you project, you imagine, you romanticize, you fall for women who reflect your wounds, you chase what's familiar, not what's healthy, you mistake chaos for passion, you confuse unpredictability with depth, because the part of you that still hasn't grown up, the part that still believes love must be earned, that affection must be chased, that approval is the same as connection. That part doesn't want love, it wants salvation, and no woman can give you that. So what do? You stop. You look inward. You meet your own anima, the feminine within, the longing, the chaos, the creativity, the tenderness. You make her conscious, because until you do, you'll keep seeking her outside you, and every woman you meet will carry the weight of your unmet feminine, and she'll fail, because she wasn't made to carry your soul. That's your job, that's your initiation, that's individuation, not becoming perfect, but becoming whole. She didn't leave you. She left the version of you she built, the version she imagined, the version she projected, the version who never really existed outside her own mind. And that is what breaks you. Not her absence, but the unraveling of who you thought you were through her eyes. Because you believed her gaze defined you. You believed her approval made you real. You believed that if she desired you, it meant you were finally enough. But Jung would ask, What if you never existed in her world as anything but a metaphor, a stand-in, a symbol, a placeholder for something she's never faced within herself? Her animus unconscious, idealized tyrannical, was never in love with your reality. It was obsessed with its own reflection through your body, and the moment you stopped reflecting it, you were erased, discarded like a miscast actor, rewritten out of a script you didn't know you were in. This is the collapse, not of the relationship but of the illusion, and it hurts not because she left you but because she took the role with her. The role that gave your pain purpose, the role that gave your emptiness a mask, the role that told you who to be. Now that she's gone, so is the structure, and you're left standing naked in the ruins, realizing you don't know who you are without someone else's dream to inhabit. You want to blame her. It's easier that way. You want to call her toxic, manipulative, cruel. But beneath the anger lives something more honest: shame. Shame that you gave yourself away so easily, so eagerly. Shame that you needed her fantasy more than your truth. Shame that the man you became for her was never built to survive without her. You weren't in love with her. You were addicted to being necessary. You were addicted to being seen, even if it wasn't really you she saw. And now you feel hollow, not because she broke you, but because she mirrored the hollowness you refused to face. And here's the twist: she didn't do it to you. You invited it, because a part of you believed this was the only way to be loved. By performing, by becoming, by being useful, not by being real, never by being real. So what now? This is the part where men crumble, where they run into the next performance, a new woman, a new script, a new high. But nothing changes, because the cast is different, but the director is still the same. You're unconscious. Until you confront that, until you look your own psyche in the eye, you will keep repeating the same collapse. Different face, same destruction. Jung called this shadow work, the descent into yourself, the refusal to blame, the refusal to numb, the refusal to run. Instead you descend. You grieve, you shed the mask, and when you do, you meet the man beneath the performance, and he is not polished. He is not charming. He is not seductive. He is raw. He is uncertain. He is flawed, but he is real, and that is the beginning of individuation. Because the collapse is sacred. It is the fire that burns down the false self. It is the death before rebirth, and only those brave enough to sit in that fire, to stay when the illusion screams for resurrection, can be reborn as something true. Not as her fantasy, not as your ego's armour, but as a man who no longer chases mirrors, a man who no longer fears being unseen, a man who no longer mistakes fantasy for love, because he has met his own feminine, and in doing so he no longer needs to find her in someone else. Let that sink in. She was never the answer, she was the teacher, and her lesson: stop living in someone else's myth. Write your own, even if it means walking alone through the dark, because in that darkness you will finally see who you are when no one is watching. And that man is the one no woman can ever make or break again, because he's not performing, he's finally awake. Now the fantasy is gone, the mask is ash, the stage is empty, and all that's left is silence. Not the silence of peace, the silence of exposure. The silence that comes when the noise fades and you realise you've never really heard your own voice. Only echoes of her desires, of society's expectations, of your father's anger, your mother's absence, the world's unspoken command: be something, just not you. So you sit, alone, no scripts, no audience, no applause, just the uncomfortable holy stillness of self-confrontation. You feel naked, stripped of all the versions of you that once kept you safe. And then it happens, the memories start speaking, not in words but in sensation. That moment when your father looked through you like you were invisible. That day she said she loved you, but only when you acted like someone else. That ache in your chest when you realised affection could be earned but never trusted. You thought you were here to heal from her, but really you're here to meet the parts of you she mirrored. Jung called it the shadow, All the parts of yourself you disowned, the rage you swallowed, the neediness you buried, the fear you laughed off, the softness you mocked, the grief you never let rise, and now it's all knocking on the door, asking to come home. But letting them in, that's terrifying, because you were taught that a man must be strong, and strong, they said, means silent. It means stoic, unshakable, untouched. But Jung disagreed. He believed a man only becomes strong when he integrates his weakness, only becomes whole when he welcomes what he once rejected, not as flaws, but as forgotten allies. So you let the shadow speak, you let the pain rise, you let the boy inside you cry, and you don't run this time, you don't numb it, you don't scroll past it, you just sit, in the dark, and for the first time you realise the darkness isn't trying to kill you, it's trying to free you, because buried inside it is truth. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be whole. You were never meant to be a mask. You were meant to be a mirror of your own depth, not someone else's fantasy. You were never meant to be chosen to feel worthy. You were meant to choose yourself. And now, standing at the bottom of your soul, you see the path forward. It's not paved with praise, not lit by validation. It's rough, it's winding, it's silent, but it's real, and it's yours. This is individuation, not a buzzword, not self-help fluff, but the brutal, beautiful process of becoming who you were before the world told you who to be. It's not sexy, it doesn't sell, but it will save your life, because it makes you unshakable, not invincible, but rooted, not untouchable, but sovereign, a man who knows himself and no longer needs to be needed. So now what you rebuild, not with her in mind, not with approval in sight, but with truth as your compass. You learn to speak without performing, to feel without apologizing, to want without shame, to walk into a room without shrinking or puffing up, to stand as you are, without defense, without illusion, without fear of being left, because even if you are left, you will not leave yourself again. The descent ends not with a roar, but with a quiet recognition I am, and that is enough. You no longer want to be chosen. That hunger, that ache, that desperate need to be picked by her, it's gone. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've remembered something more sacred. You've remembered yourself, the man behind the mask, the soul beneath the strategy, the strength that needs no stage. And in that remembering, something ancient stirs. Not the wounded boy pretending to be a hero, but the man who no longer needs a war to prove his worth. This is the return, the rise, but not the kind of rise that others applaud. It's not loud, it's not viral, it won't win you followers. It may in fact cost you everything you once thought mattered, because this version of you, he doesn't play the old games, he doesn't flirt with projection, he doesn't seduce with fantasy, he stands, still, certain, sovereign. Jung called this the integration of the self, not the ego, not the persona, but the self capital S, the union of opposites within, masculine and feminine, light and shadow, power and vulnerability. And when a man reaches this state, he becomes magnetic, not because he chases attention, but because he radiates presence. Women feel it, not in their minds, in their bodies, because something in them recognizes this man is not here to be controlled. This man cannot be puppeteered by charm, guilt, or fantasy. This man has already faced the deepest rejection of all his own self-abandonment and survived. And that, my friend, makes you dangerous, not to women, to illusions, because now you see through them. You see the fantasy before it finishes forming. You see the mask before it's fully worn. You see the script before you're cast. And instead of performing, you pause. You choose. You speak from clarity, not compulsion. And when she projects, you don't collapse. You reflect. You don't react. You respond. Some will call you cold, distant, detached. But you're not. You're discerning. You're rooted. You're unwilling to trade your truth for temporary affection. You don't chase chaos and call it chemistry. You don't confuse control for care. You don't need to be needed, you want to be met. This is the authentic masculine, not the loudest voice in the room, not the richest man on the stage, but the one who has become a home for himself, who has nothing to prove, nothing to hide, nothing to perform, and in that stillness a paradox forms, because now that you don't need her, the right kind of woman begins to appear, not the one who demands you play a part, but the one who has done her own descent, who has met her own shadow, who has faced her animus, and who stands not in fantasy, but in truth. She won't try to save you. She won't try to worship you. She won't need you to fill a hole in her identity. She'll simply walk beside you, equal, awake, free. And together you don't complete each other. You mirror each other. You reflect the fire you've each forged alone. Two sovereign flames choosing not to merge into one, but to burn brighter in tandem. This is not romance. It is revelation. This is not possession. It is partnership. This is not the dream. It is the real. And for most, it is terrifying, because it requires you to show up without your armor, without your charm, without your script. Just you, unmasked. Can you do that? Can you speak without the lines? Can you love without control? Can you stay when it's hard and leave when it's false? Can you be honest, even if it means being alone? These are the questions that separate boys from men. These are the fires that forge kings. Not kings of women, kings of themselves. And you're almost there. Not because you've conquered her, but because you've finally stopped abandoning yourself. You've faced your shadow. You've met your anima. You've stopped performing for love. And now you see her differently. The women you used to crave. They don't intoxicate you anymore. Because now you don't just see her face. You see what's behind it. You see the unconscious, the theatre, the animus, the ghost she hasn't met. And suddenly, what once felt magnetic feels dangerous. Not because she's evil, but because she's asleep. Jung didn't just speak about men's projections. He warned of something else, something few dare to talk about, the possessed feminine. When a woman has not made her inner masculine conscious, when she has not met the tyrant she holds within, she projects him onto the world, onto men, onto you, and he speaks through her voice, not as love, as law, not as connection, as judgment. He tells her that real men must dominate or submit. He tells her that disagreement is danger, that independence is rejection, that mystery is betrayal. So she tests, she pulls, she punishes. And when you respond with softness, she accuses you of weakness. When you respond with clarity, she calls it control. Because her animus, when unconscious, becomes a god. An invisible dictator with a silver tongue. One who speaks in certainty without compassion. Moralizes without empathy. Wants intimacy but fears vulnerability. And worst of all, he convinces her it's all your fault. And now you're not her lover. You're her projection, her practice partner, the battlefield for a war she hasn't yet fought within herself. And you will lose, not because you failed, but because the battle was never yours. You were just the closest target. But here's the tragedy. She doesn't know she's possessed. She doesn't know she's projecting, because culture told her the animus is virtue, that her inner fire is always truth, that her voice is always pure, that her intuition never lies. But Jung knew better. He saw what happens when a woman is taught to trust her inner masculine, without questioning where it came from, without confronting its shadow, without integrating it. He called it spiritual possession, a dangerous fusion of instinct and inflation, a performance of righteousness, while drowning in confusion. You've seen it. The woman who seeks a saviour, then destroys him for not being God. The woman who says she wants truth, but panics when it doesn't flatter her. The woman who demands freedom, then shames you for not chasing her. You've stood in that storm, and if you're still standing, you've earned this truth. It was never about you. And still, this isn't about blame. This isn't about hating women. It's about seeing clearly. Because projection is not a gendered disease. It's human. But when both partners are asleep, when both are projecting, you don't get love. You get theatre, you get scripts, you get collapse, and no amount of desire can save that. But now you've woken up, and because of that, you can spot the woman who hasn't. You can spot the performance before it seduces you. You can spot the shadow behind the shimmer, and you no longer try to save her, because you know you can't do her work. You can't kill her animus. You can't wake her from the dream. You can only walk your path and let her walk hers. But sometimes you'll meet her, the one who's descended too, the one who met her animus and refused to become his mouthpiece, the one who burned the script and built something deeper in its ashes, a woman who no longer needs a saviour because she saved herself. And when you meet her, it doesn't feel like fireworks, it feels like a mirror, still, clear, quiet, true. She doesn't flatter you, she reflects you, she doesn't chase, she invites, she doesn't need you to perform, she wants you to be, and she shows up the same way, not as goddess, not as fantasy, but as a woman, real, imperfect, awake. Together you don't complete each other, you challenge each other, you nourish each other, you mirror the divine not through perfection, but through presence. Two sovereigns walking side by side, not clinging, not fixing, not rescuing, just being, fully, finally, free. This is where the story ends, not with heartbreak, not with bitterness, but with clarity. The kind that doesn't beg to be believed, the kind that just is. You've descended, you've unravelled, you faced the mirror and didn't look away, and now you stand in something you never knew you needed. Reality. Not the dream, not the projection, not the seduction of being chosen, just the simple, quiet, unspeakable power of choosing yourself. This kind of love, it won't trend. It won't flood your dopamine receptors. It won't always look like a fairy tale, but it will last. Because it's built on truth. Two whole people. No saviors, no victims, no roles, just presence, just choice, just sovereignty. And that's the paradox, isn't it? You had to let go of the fantasy to finally taste something real. You had to die to who you thought you were, to become the man you actually are. And in doing so, you became the kind of man who cannot be seduced by projection and cannot be destroyed by rejection, because you are no longer a character in someone else's story. You're the author, you're the reality, you're the truth. That truth will cost you everything that was false, but what you get in return is freedom. So now I'll ask you, what story have you been cast in? What performance have you been perfecting? Whose approval are you still chasing? And most importantly, when will you stop? Not in anger, not in rebellion, but in awakening. You've made it this far into the journey. That tells me something. It tells me you're one of the men who's ready to see what most spend their whole lives avoiding. That's rare, that's powerful, and it deserves space. So let's keep walking this path together. Comment below what part of this hit the hardest for you. Was it the fantasy, the collapse, the descent, the mirror? I read every reply, and this space is for you. If this resonated, share it with a brother who's still in the loop, still performing, still bleeding for the wrong kind of love. And if you want more content like this, from Jungian psychology to raw poetic breakdowns of modern masculinity, hit subscribe. Let's wake up this generation one man at a time. See you in the next one. Until then, stand still, stand true, and never forget, you were never broken, just buried.